Welcome to Mentoring Moments. Mentoring Moments is a sub-series of the E-Commerce Edge podcast. It is composed of clips taken from Jason's one-to-one and group mentorship sessions. Welcome to another episode of the E-Commerce Edge with me, your host, Jason Greenwood. I have another amazing guest to introduce to you today, and he is Mr. Marcus ZANQUILA from, well, let's just say from LVRG, because it's LVRG, but I'm assuming you pronounce it as leverage, correct, Marcus?
Correct. 100% correct.
Awesome. Welcome to the podcast. It's so great to have you along for the ride with me today. And Manel Gomez, another recent guest on the pod, introduced us. And he said, look, you got to get Marcus on the pod because he is the man. And he'll be super useful to your listeners, to your audience around all things growth hacking within e-commerce, and specifically how to bring some of these skills and capabilities in-house instead of having to necessarily rely on third parties, agencies, SIs, etc., to be able to build and grow your business, to be able to bring those skills and talents and capabilities in-house to not only reduce costs, but also retain control, really. Welcome to the podcast, Marcus.
Amazing. Thank you for the warm introduction, Jason. And looking forward to provide value to everybody that's listening. And let's go.
Love it. And you said that you were born and raised in Munich, but you now live in Spain, right?
Yeah, exactly. I live in beautiful Barcelona, if you can see it in the background. So managed to get into the warm weather, let's say.
Yeah, and how's your Spanish coming along? I know when I moved here, I took 2 years of Spanish in high school, but then I didn't use it for many years. And for the last 2 years living in Mexico, man, I've really had to level up my Spanish game pretty quick.
Your Spanish game. Yeah, no, definitely better after 2 years now that I live here also. Yeah, I can definitely work more on it, but it's my fiance is speaking Italian, so then at some point I got everything mixed up. Now it's actually more Italian than Spanish, but yeah.
Wow, amazing. The one good thing about speaking German is that you already understand high-low German, and you also understand gendered words. And obviously that's common in Spanish. It's not common in English. Definitely having to learn all those grammatical normalities in Spanish with this English-speaking tongue. It takes a little bit of practice, that's for sure. But I'm completely transactional. I can go out and I can have a conversation, like a basic conversation.
That's the most
order things at restaurants. I can speak to the people working on our house. I can have basic conversations. I wouldn't say I'm fluent by any stretch of the imagination, but I can at least survive in Spanish.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. The rest is pointing fingers, and that's okay. You always get there.
Absolutely. Google Translate comes in handy when you get stuck.
There you go.
Listen, look, this is going to be a great conversation. And tell us how you came to be in this space in the first place. And I guess you take a very different tack to what a lot of e-commerce strategists, marketers, brand side owners and players. You've been in this space for a really long time, both as a startup and an e-commerce founder, but also an e-commerce strategist and an e-commerce performance marketing specialist. But what caused you've been running LVRG now for 5.5 years. So what made you even think of the idea to move away from being a done for you service to more along the lines of being done with you, or at least a more of a training and a knowledge transfer type of a service versus, hey, I want to work with you long term. Give me a whole bunch of ad spend and I'll manage this for you so that you don't have to do it yourself. What caused that idea to create that pivot for your business?
Yeah, very, very interesting question. Very, very important question. As you mentioned, like I'm an e-com for 8 years now, doing digital marketing, or let's say paid marketing, for 10 years, 11 years now. That, like, at some point, like I started out like selling postcards on Amazon, and that was like my first touch point with e-commerce. So this is how I got my hands dirty and just started things and tried things. A bunch of other failed stores. And at some point I just stumbled upon this opportunity of running the ads for somebody else, right? So this is how I started out, as a freelancer, essentially, and had some pretty cool successes in the beginning, learned a lot, failed a lot, obviously. But the interesting part, and this brings me back to your question, is that I always wanted to own e-commerce brands, right? I wanted to have my own e-commerce brands. But at the same time, I learned so much like helping these other e-commerce brands, right? That I could obviously also use for my brand, but then again, bring it back to those brands and help them scale. What I realized at some point, like doing the work for others or for other brand owners, is that there's some kind of misalignment when it comes to the incentives, right? So you as a, let's say, when you take the part of the service provider, you're incentivized obviously to maximize your own earnings finally. Obviously by growing the brand, but depending on the deal structure, this might not be the most beneficial thing for the brand, right? So that's where it clicked, because I had a couple of like case studies where, I don't know, like I scaled a brand like crazy from 27K to like almost 900K in a month. It changed their business, but at the same time, they didn't have any in-house capabilities, right? So in some way, they were dependent on me continuing to run their ads, right? Which is a cool thing as a freelancer or agency, but it's not necessarily what creates the most value for the business. And then, as I mentioned, like I made the switch back to being an e-commerce owner. And now I'm like, let's say, co-owning 3 e-commerce brands. Combined, they're doing like 900K a month currently. Now I get the perspective of the e-commerce owner, right? And I'm like, I don't want to give all of the ownership of the acquisition to somebody external that maybe doesn't fully understand my brand, doesn't understand what my business goals are, which are very different from brand to brand. So this is what led me to say, hey, actually, I want to help e-commerce owners own their acquisition, right? Without being dependent on somebody external. And it's really amazing to see how this changes the brand owner's approach to acquisition once they really fully understand what the real KPIs are, what they should look for, and how they use like paid channels to do what is most important to their business growth. Yeah.
I guess the other thing here is that, or it strikes me that even if they decide to outsource some or all of the actual doing of the doing, it strikes me that if they work with you, for a period of time, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 6 months, maybe it's 12 months, whatever it is, at least they will understand strategically what they should be doing, and how to set goals, how to set reasonable goals, expectations, understand what the market opportunity looks like, be able to understand how to manage these channels. And then ultimately it allows them to select and be able to effectively manage any outsourced resources that they would. Let's say they work with Manel, for example, for meta ads, and they say, hey, look, we know how to do this. We could do this, but we don't want to hire an internal resource, train them up. But me as maybe a business owner or a leader or a founder or a CMO, at least I understand what's going on behind the scenes so that I can effectively manage that outsourced resource to make sure that I'm getting the best return on investment that I can with that contracted resource, right? So it strikes me that regardless of whether somebody does actually ultimately end up taking this all in-house and owning it forever, or whether they work with service providers, if you can't manage a service provider and effectively, then it means you're probably more open to being not necessarily ripped off, but certainly not being able to extract the best value out of that service provider that you could if you actually understood what they were doing.
Yeah, that's like you're touching on this point that I was like thinking a lot about over the last years, which is really owning let's say that the direction of your growth, right? So you have to understand, and this is what you mean by the strategic level, you have to really understand what's going on. And this is like the first part that I work with founders is, most of the founders that come to me, they have been burned by many agencies, right? So they have run from agency to agency. Obviously, every agency is promising you the world and then delivering nothing or not a lot. And this is like where they come from. So what I start with, or what I start working with them, is really to understand what are your goals, right? Like, where do you want to be? Like, do you want to sell the brand? Do you want to, I don't know, improve profits? bring in some more team members, right? This is very different as from brand to brand. It's very different. I'm just trying to figure out with them what's the goal. And then depending on what the goal is and like how fast you want to get there, there are obviously different ways to get there. But the important part is that you always stay in control. You always control where you want to go. And as you mentioned, there's no problem with, let's say, hiring an ad creative agency, right? Once you've validated, and that's what I teach the brands, once you've validated certain things and you know this is the way to go, now I'm just looking for more output because I know this more output will give me a certain ROI, then that's fine, right? But if you're not fully sure, which way to go when it comes to creative strategy, for example, and you just hire somebody and hope that they find something that works, that's the problem, right? And this is why this fails most of the times.
Yeah, it's interesting that you point that out because what I always tell my clients, and I consult on very different things to you. I don't consult on performance marketing. I consult primarily on tech and operational strategy and channel strategy. And I'm focused heavily on the B2B world as opposed to the B2C and D2C world. But the one thing we have in common is that I tell my clients consistently, you can outsource tactics and implementation, but you cannot outsource strategy. If you cannot develop a clear internal strategy about what you want to achieve and the experience you want to create for your customers, if you don't have a clear vision on that, then me and nobody else is actually going to be able to help you. Because like my mother used to tell me when I was a kid, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. And so the thing is you got to be really clear about what you are trying to achieve. Otherwise, the best agencies in the world will fail at it because at the end of the day, they can't come in. I can help them, like when I go in and I do a discovery or whatever, I can help them identify their requirements inside. I can help them even format them. I can help them document them in a way that's meaningful to an agency to help them implement those things. But really, they have to have an internally generated, an internally bought in, an internally clear strategy of what they want to achieve technically, operationally, organizationally, customer experience wise. If they're not clear on that and the outcomes that they want to achieve as a business, then and I consider myself one of the greats in terms of consulting, I can't help them. And so I think I look at myself as someone who can help them articulate what they're trying to achieve in a way that's meaningful to all the partners that can help them make that happen. But they have to be able to define that. We have to be able to get that we have to be able to get that down on paper in some way. We have to be able to extract that out of all the different departments of the business and what they're trying to achieve and what their agendas are and what their needs are to hit their KPIs as they've been KPI'd. For example, a CEO says, here's our financial KPIs, here's our fulfillment KPIs, here's all different KPIs across our business. How did you, in many cases, it's pushing back and it's saying, how did you even arrive at those KPIs? Did you just pull them out of your backside, or were they based in some sort of concrete foundation that said, okay, we think the opportunity is this because of XYZ reasons, and we think we're uniquely poised to be able to capitalize on that opportunity because of ABC reasons. Now that is the foundation of a solid strategy. But if you're just pulling numbers out of your backside, you're pulling KPIs out of your backside with no foundation in reality or trends or market opportunity or market research, if there's no foundation in reality, then you're setting your team up to fail from the beginning. And is that something that you see on a regular basis?
Absolutely. You just mentioned market research, right? And just basing like the decisions on which step to take next, basing it on real data, right? That's one thing that I see that a lot of DTC founders are struggling with. And now it's easy to say that because I've worked with 50 brands, I have my own brands, but in the beginning I did the same mistakes, right? It's just very common. Like, how should you know? But it's just going with I see a lot of brands just going with their gut, right? And just basically standing in front of a whiteboard and saying, okay, we have this product here. This angle could work for this product. Let's produce some UGC content for this angle, right? So this is something like they just, and I always say, I want validation over assumptions, right? I don't want to go out and spend money on something where I didn't have any process to arrive to this conclusion, and I didn't have any hypotheses that is formulated. So this is where most of the brands, in my opinion, lose a ton of money, right? Because behind every test, there is a lot of money, just resources involved, energy, time spent. And this is what people forget a lot of time. This is one cost. And the other cost is that you have unknown opportunity costs, right? If you're not making things work this month because you just didn't follow a proper strategy, this means you're actually losing, I don't know, depending on your size, like 100K in revenue this month, right? And all the next months. So that's the real cost of just trying a bunch of stuff and throwing it at Facebook, for example, when you run Facebook ads and just seeing what sticks. So this is really what I see, is that a lot of people try to shortcut this and just try to get results fast, whereas you actually have better and more long-lasting results if you do the things like market research, where you really, instead of just like making assumptions, you have a proper process. And I share this a lot on, for example, my YouTube, where I really go in depth and I show people, hey, like, you have your product, try to figure out what are the angles, right? Do the research. Right? This is how you do the research, right? You look at your reviews, you talk to your existing customers, and all of a sudden you can come up with a really strong first best guess and just test like a couple of variations in a very lean way. And this will lead you to an amazing result, right? I see a lot of people skipping this process, but as you said, this is the foundation, right? If you don't understand this and you don't want to put in this work, you're actually going to run in circles.
To your point, I spend a lot of time on Reddit, and I'm in all sorts of e-commerce subreddits. I'm in all sorts of digital marketing subreddits. And literally on the daily, I will see 10 to 20 posts of new one-man bands, one-woman bands, started up a website on Shopify, spent $5,000. They were dropshipping websites. They secured a few products, or maybe they even bought some inventory in, and then they're trying to sell it. It's their first time into e-commerce. It's a trial by fire. They set up a web store. They run $5,000 or $10,000 or $20,000 worth of Meta and Facebook ads, and they're getting no traffic. They're getting no conversions. They're getting no nothing. And they're saying, should I keep going? What's wrong? Please give me some feedback on my website. Tell me what. And it's I try to answer and I try to help as many of these people as possible. But it's the same story, literally repeated every single day, because they look at it like the field of dreams. Build it and they will come. And maybe that was true 10, 15 years ago, but and it wasn't even really that true then, but it certainly is not true today. And the low barrier to entry to establishing a Shopify website, I can go out and build a Shopify website in an hour, list some products through a drop shipping connector that connects to some Chinese marketplaces, and I'm up and running. And I'm in a half a day, I'm up and running with a business. Now, having a storefront is very different to having a successful storefront. Having a storefront is very different to having a successful Amazon brand, for example, or a successful eBay brand, or a successful marketplace brand, full stop, or a successful social brand. And what I find is that if they would have, in many instances, if they would have done just a little bit of homework on the costs for advertising in their category, for advertising in their market, and for advertising their specific products, they would have quickly been able to work out that the cost of acquisition for customers for their products is going to be so high, and the margins are so slim, even if they make a sale, that their business, they would have been able to work out before they ever went and set up their Shopify store, that their business model is totally unsustainable.
Exactly. Then it's not a business.
And it's not a business, right?
Exactly.
If you have to subsidize this business indefinitely, it's not a business. And so I think that a lot of new business owners could save themselves a lot of heartache, a lot of money, a lot of disappointment, a lot of frustration if they actually looked at what the market opportunity is, and whether they can actually even create something sustainable in the first place in the market they're trying to go into. Because for example, probably greater than half of these businesses that ask for feedback on Reddit They're print-on-demand businesses, like one of the most competitive, and they're
Low
saying, hey,
margin businesses finally, if you do the math.
I'm gonna use Gen AI and Dolly to create my designs, and then I'm gonna send those to a print-on-demand service that's gonna ship to my customer. So I've got no capital outlay, and but what they don't think about is the opportunity cost that you spoke about. So maybe they're not buying product up front, but they're gonna have to spend a lot of money to acquire customers, and there's no guarantee that those customers can convert because of the competitiveness in the market and the well-established brands that are already in the market. There's almost nothing new under the sun these days. And the reality is that almost any market someone chooses to enter is going to be highly competitive. There's almost no blue ocean space left in e-commerce. And so I think this is the thing that I'm guessing when you go in, is it sometimes you got to tell them their baby is ugly, meaning you got to tell them, hey, my honest appraisal is at this particular point in time, based on the underlying financials of your business, that the cost to acquire customers in your vertical and your category and in your market mean that it's going to be very difficult to be successful with your current business model. Is that the kind of discussion you sometimes have to have?
Yeah, definitely. Most of the brands that I work with are, let's say, already at a certain point, right? So most of the brands that I work with, they're doing like 50K a month to 100K a month. They want to get to 8 figures, right? So I help them basically take things in-house, get to multiple 7 figures, and then also 8 figures. So this is like I would say the biggest part. But they have, let's say, slightly different challenges. It's not so much the challenge that they even create sales, right? So they already passed that. So they have some kind of market validation. But then still, it's the same thing just with, for example, angles, right? So instead of just relying on one angle that you think is true and finally being a little ignorant, right? And just trying to push what you think is right to the market, instead of doing that, I show them how to do it the other way around. So basically what you mentioned is listening to the market, looking at where is the opportunity, right? Finally, almost all of the products solve some kind of pain point, right? So we need to understand what is the pain point out there and what are the people trying to solve, and how can I position my product so that it makes sense to these people that this is the perfect solution, right? So one thing that I work on is this part, to make their products match the market, right? To basically help them find the right market desire to go after. And then the second part is to make the financials work, right? So one thing that I talk about a lot, and it's actually the first part of my strategy, is really to optimize your front-end offer, right? To even make it possible to advertise your product profitably. Because this is, to your point, this is what a lot of brand owners, they don't really think about it. And I hear stuff like, yeah, we're not so profitable on the first sale, but then people come back and stuff. But when you look at the numbers, when you look at cohort analysis, you look at how people are developing, one trend and one pattern, and I think that's a good takeaway for a lot of people, is that when you sell only one item versus you sell a bundle, a routine, something where people have to commit. Yeah, a kit,
a solution
exactly.
versus a SKU.
Exactly. When you just sell one SKU and you look at how people develop over time, their lifetime value is a lot lower. Like their lifetime value, let's say development, is a lot lower than when you sell someone a solution, a bundle, for example, of different kinds of SKUs that solve a specific pain point. Because the likelihood that they will like at least one of these SKUs and come back for that is just 10 times higher than if somebody only tries one product. And this is what I always say, you should be in the business of acquiring customer journeys, not just single transactions, right? This is what most of the people get wrong. They only think about the first sale. That's also what most of the agencies do. They only think about the first sale. But if you think in terms of how can I acquire somebody that then helps me get profits every single month down the line, those are the businesses that absolutely go crazy, right? Because then it's every single month you're just adding on top of what you're doing instead of just starting at zero every single month, right?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, because even nowadays, even in B2B land,
Mhm.
it's very rare that I encounter a pure manufacturer or a pure distributor or wholesaler. They're almost always a hybrid, meaning that
Mm.
they will manufacture maybe 20% of their catalog, and then like 80% of their catalog they're a distributor of.
Mm.
And I think that the main motivator behind that is several things. One is to de-risk their business. Two, but how are they de-risking their business by doing this? It's because they don't want to go to market with just these 20 SKUs, these 100 SKUs, or these 1,000 SKUs that I make.
Mm.
I want to have an entire solution for my customer. And that's why I think distributors in particular, they oftentimes are developing their own product lines, and they're developing their own services and implementation layer as well. For example, if I'm a industrial distributor, industrial products distributor, I will probably be developing my own line of products. Maybe it's my own line of pumps, or it's my own line of piping equipment or conveying equipment or whatever it is. But then I'll also have a solution division within the business that's got project management, that's got installation design. Maybe I even do installations. Maybe I even do servicing. So let's say I distribute air conditioning equipment or HVAC or whatever it is. I'm going to have specialists in my industry that are providing services, that are providing products, and we're providing complete packages of solutions. And I saw this work very well. I was working with a four-wheel drive company, a four-wheel drive products retailer, and they were B2C, D2C, B2B, and dismantling all in the one business. So they had their own retail stores where they were selling four-wheel drive components and parts and upgrades and aftermarket equipment, roof racks and suspension and all this sort of stuff. They were selling that to other four-wheel drive installation shops that were installing this, like suspension kits, lift kits, all this sort of stuff. So they were also selling to retail stores that didn't do installations, so just your auto parts stores. They had their own shop that they were selling products directly to consumers and doing the installation of those products. Plus, they were dismantling four-wheel drives and selling secondhand parts at the same time. So they had this entire flywheel, and some of their products were branded. So they had their own range of products as well that were branded with their own brand. And some of those competed with some of the other name brand products in the market. But they were really smart. So they said, okay, we can sell these individual SKUs. But when someone comes to our website, let's say I have a Jeep Wrangler, for example, and I want to upgrade my suspension. Sure, I could navigate the site. I could put in my plate number, and I could see which products are a fit for my car. I could look at the shocks. I could look at the springs. I could look at the sway links. I could look at all these different things. Or if we come up with a package that says, okay, this is what you want to do with your car, here's the package you need to do it. And it's got everything you need. It's got the shocks. It's got the springs. It's got everything you need. It's got the light kit. It's got the whole thing. And so instead of me having to try to figure out all the different components that I need, sure, if I'm an expert and I'm like a four-wheel drive guru, then I'm going to come and I'm going to look for those specific components. But if I'm not a guru and I just want to take my Wrangler four-wheel driving on the sand in some sand dunes, then here's the sand package. Here's the sand dune package.
Exactly.
You know? And so I think to your point, coming up with packaged solution sets to people's problems that they don't know how to do the homework themselves. They want you to do the homework for them. That's the curation, and that's the value that you bring. I think even if you're just an aggregator retailer, I think that's the value you bring.
Yeah. So the underlying principle is really people, like, we are lazy, right? People in general are lazy. Like, we want easy solutions, right? We want something where we don't have to think a lot. We don't have to invest a lot of time.
And take the risk that I get it wrong.
That's the next thing that I want to say, like the risk, right? We don't want to have a lot of risk. And taking the wrong thing, like having to send it back, having to like try it out. Let's say if it's, I don't know, skincare, for example, you try it out on your skin and it doesn't work, you get breakouts, whatever, and then you cannot send it back, or you have to pay to send it back. Those are things that go through a potential customer's mind seconds before they buy, right? So we have to, and that's one of the reasons, or one big reason why people then end up not buying, because maybe they're not fully sure about the risk. Whatever, I'll check it tomorrow, and they never come back, right? So we as advertisers, we have to make sure that our front-end offer is easy to understand, solve a specific pain point, is unique, therefore. It's not just like something that you find everywhere, and takes away a lot of risk, right? Meaning, for example, giving guarantees, right? If you know that your product is amazing and you have the track record, you don't have a lot of like refunds or return, like the return rate is really low, that's a perfect thing. Like I always ask people, what's the refund rate? 1%. Okay, double the guarantee, triple the guarantee, because that will help so many more people to actually do this step and to say nothing can happen, right? I can just try it out, nothing will happen. Worst case, I send it back, I get my money back. And then one final thing that is like, if you want, so a little secret tip that I do in every single store is to make sure that the perceived value of the package exceeds the actual price that people are paying by a lot, right? Because people they're not only making decisions based off of the absolute price, but based off of the value, and they're comparing the value to the actual price, right? So if we're able to come up with a package that is of higher absolute value, right? Let's make an example. One SKU would be $50, okay? This is going to be very hard to scale to 8 figures, let's say, just by itself, if it's not like a super hot product that everybody wants, right? The first thing that I work on is how can we come up with a bundle or a front-end offer where the absolute value might be $100 or even more, right? But the absolute price. But the value of this bundle, let's say if we pay $100, the value of this bundle should be $150, right? So that people pay more absolutely, but they get the better deal, right? And this is very important, I think, if it's D2C or B2B, just to make sure that this first offer for somebody that becomes your first customer is so good, they would be stupid to say no, right? That's where I want to get the offer, because this gives me the best chances to actually make it work using paid ads and being profitable on day one.
Wow. And when you first meet with a new client, I'm guessing you do some form of discovery or an audit of their ad accounts or an audit of their business and say, okay, what is the products you're selling? What's the category you're selling in? What's the average margin? What's your scalability? Can you even, if I can help you go from 1,000 units a month to 100,000 units a month, can you even meet that demand? Are we driving traffic to products that are out of stock, for example, which is what I see happen routinely. It happened even when I was still working inside of retail brands. This was something that happened routinely, is that ads would not get deactivated for products that were out of stock and customers couldn't even buy. So what are your first 1, 2, 3 steps? We first get inside these businesses. How do you take stock of where they're at so that you can help them roadmap to where they need to be?
Yeah, okay. Very good question. So very first thing that I look at is really just the new customer data, right? So only thing I'm looking at, because we're focused on acquisition, right? So we want to make sure that we understand what are the right metrics to see if we're profitable in the acquisition or how the acquisition is going. So first thing is to make sure to track the right numbers, which is most of the cases new customer return on ad spend, right? And new customer CPA. So how much am I paying for a customer? And then how much is this basically the customer bringing in terms of revenue versus what I pay, right? So this is just to have an audit to track this properly. And that's funny because this is where it starts already for a lot of brands. They're not really tracking it. They have no idea, right? They're just looking at the return on ad spend in Meta or Facebook, and they see, oh, it should be fine. But this is not good enough. You really have to extract what are the new customer sales. Then the second thing that I look at is the margin structure, obviously, right? To be able to judge what if this new customer return on ad spend that we're tracking is good or bad, we need to understand what does the margin structure look like, right? And how much can we actually afford in the current model to pay for a customer, right? If I don't know this number, which is like the target CPA, then I'm basically, whatever I do doesn't really matter because I'm not going to go into the right direction, right? Yeah, the second thing is really to understand, do the math. And obviously now in my mentorship, I have like sheets for that. You just put in a couple of numbers and KPIs and you get back, okay, this is the target CPA. Also important to take into account the customer lifetime value, right? So these customers that I'm acquiring, how much will they bring in, right? And then going back to day one, basically, how much can I pay for such a customer? So that's the second step. And then the third step is just to do an audit of what has been done in the ad account, right? And what does the creative pipeline look like, right? Because that's really like the first thing. I mentioned the front end offer, obviously. We talk about this while we do the numbers and make the numbers work. But then the second thing is just what has been done. What I see a lot of times is like super complex campaign structures and setups. That's like, that used to work. I've done crazy stuff like a couple of years back, duplicating campaigns like 50 times and stuff. It used to work, but that was basically trying to hack the algorithm. Now it's really simplified, and we basically run the same setup, which is like a 1 to 2 campaign setup for all the brands. Is even if the brand is like making 50K or 1 million a month, it's the same exact setup. And then the other thing is really the creative strategy, right? So how many creatives are you testing on a weekly basis? This already tells me which direction do you go, right? What kind of momentum do you have or you don't have, right? So yeah, those are the things that we look at first.
And do you help brands to understand that, or how to understand that two customers that may look similar in terms of their value to your business are not? I'll give you an example. So I got two customers that their first purchase is about the same value. They repurchase at about the same rate. They generate about the same revenue every year for us. But one customer returns at a 50% rate and the other customer returns at a 5% rate. Or one customer, in terms of cost to serve, contacts us an average of 3 times per order, and the other customer contacts us, whether that be email, phone, live chat, carrier pigeon, whatever it is, they contact us 0.2 times on average per purchase. So the net margin that someone brings to our business, the net revenue that someone brings to our business can be very, even if gross revenue looks the same, net revenue can look very different when you take into account propensity to discount. One customer will buy something 80% of the time when it's on a discount. This customer over here, only 10% of their purchases are when something is on a discount. The net margin that someone brings to our business can be very different to the gross. And also, depending on the channel that we acquire them through, there can be some consistencies between the cohorts of customers that we acquire through different channels. Sometimes they'll have, on average, a channel will have a higher return rate. Sometimes on average, a certain channel, those customers will have a higher cost to serve. And also, in certain acquisition periods, so customers will have a different net value to us. So for example, if a certain cohort of customers, I acquire them through Cyber Weekend, the value that the net value that those customers are going to have, the lifetime net value that they're going to have on average is going to be very different to a customer that I acquire in May. You know what I mean? So I think that a lot of brands, one of the things that they overlook when they're starting to do their research is all the data they need to be collecting in a CDP, for example, outside of their email marketing platform, outside of Northbeam and Triple Whale and everything else. They need to be gathering as much zero and first party data on their customers as freaking possible so that they can go out and look for more of the best type of customers as opposed to just the raw gross revenue type of high gross revenue customers.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so funny because literally like 5 days ago, I think it's 4 or 5 days ago, I talked exactly about this in a YouTube video. Exactly what you mentioned. Like I gave that example, like you have customer A, customer B, you look at the new customer return ad spend, exactly the same, right? So they also spend exactly the same. So what do, right? Is it the same customer? Doesn't matter where you spend on. But then I basically went into the future, and what you're touching on is basically customer lifetime profitability.
Yes,
right?
Correct.
It's not only customer lifetime value, it's customer lifetime profitability. And this is what ultimately, that's the only thing that counts, right? Yes, it's nice to have big revenue numbers, but if you don't make any profit from that, what's the point?
Then you're just working harder and
yeah,
harder to make less money.
exactly. So your goal as a business owner in general is to generate profits. And you do that by providing a bunch of value to the right people and building products or services that are sticky, but not just because you made them sticky, because people really appreciate the value and want to continue to consume this product, right? Yeah, 100%. That's really what separates, in my view, and now overlooking all of these accounts, this is what separates like the few, let's say the 1% of e-commerce brands that really crush it and scale to 8 figures in no time, and the 99% that are basically trying to come up with a new strategy every single month, which is not a sustainable way of running any business. Exactly. So what I look at is really not only the first data, like on the first, let's say, touch point, but really trying to understand what are the right customers for your product, right? And this might be completely different than what you think it is, right? So oftentimes, for example, when somebody has like a skincare brand, right? They have a cream, and this cream solves multiple pain points, right? It could be for, I don't know, like age spots or wrinkles
Acne,
or
whatever.
acne, exactly, whatever. Instead of just assuming that, yeah, this is a great product for acne, I'm just going to advertise it as the anti-acne cream. You might have people that are super sticky, like they're just continuing to buy the product, or they're in a subscription, but they're using it for their age spots, but you didn't really understand. So now you're going out and getting in people that use it for acne, but they churn after the first sale, and you wonder what's wrong, right? It's because you didn't fully understand your customers. And I always say, like, you're sitting on a pot of gold. You don't even need to go out. You need to talk to your customers. If necessary, get them on the phone. Try to understand who is it that purchased 15 times over the last 3 months, right? Who is that? I want to understand that, because this might be the key to going out and basically flipping it around and attracting more of these people. Yeah, very basic principle is really to understand who are actually already my best customers and how can I just get more of the same.
Love it. Listen, man, nearly an hour has absolutely flown by. Super appreciate your time. Super appreciate your wisdom and experience in this space. Again, you have experience that I don't have, and that's so valuable to me, and it's so valuable to my listeners. Now, I'll drop a link to your LinkedIn profile in the show notes, as well as your website in the show notes. But other than that, how do you like people to get a hold of you if they want to talk all things e-com strategy and bringing some of these skills and capabilities in-house so that they don't have a total dependence on agencies or partners to do this work in-house?
Yeah. So I would say the best way to get a deeper understanding of what my strategy is and how I help brands is really to check out my YouTube. I post 2 videos, like in-depth videos per week, where I just share important strategies to make it work so you could technically do it by yourself. If you want more help, obviously, if you want to take out a lot of risk, let's say, that's where you can just contact me. There are links everywhere. But I think the best way to understand what I'm doing, and if that is relevant to you, is just to go to my YouTube and then feel free to reach out on my Instagram or LinkedIn, wherever it's more comfortable to you.
Love it. Awesome. Now, as we do come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you. I get to let you ask me one question, any question you like. It can be personal or professional. So, Mr. Marcus ZANQUILA from LVRG, what is your question for me today?
Okay, my question to you is, when you look back at your, let's say, experience in e-commerce, what was maybe like, what was a highlight and what was a low light of your career when you look back when working with clients also?
Yeah, I'll tell you the low light first, which was I had an e-commerce brand with a friend of mine. We were direct to consumer. We imported products into New Zealand. We warehoused them locally and we shipped them direct to consumer. And I think what I realized that in e-commerce, sometimes it's even more important when you decide to sell your business than when you decide to start your business. So we started off really well. I was doing this was very early days of Google. This is 25 years ago. So this was in the early days of Google, and 5 cents per click, and everything was easy, right? It was like turning on a switch, right? And we went from zero to like nearly $1 million of revenue per year in 18 months. It felt like the party was going to never end.
Yeah.
But the products that we were selling, which in the beginning had massively high dollar margins, we continued to have really good percentage margins, but the dollar margins started to drop because the average selling prices of the products, we were selling memory cards. And when we first started out, 32 megabyte memory cards were $650, not gigabyte, megabyte, right? And then eventually you could get 16 gigabyte memory cards for $50, right? And so the percentage margins we were making were still good, but the dollar margins, and this is what a lot of businesses don't understand. Percentage margin is important, but dollar margin and ASP, and they matter whether you can build a sustainable business on the back of that. And then eventually a lot of camera and phone manufacturers started giving memory cards away for free as packages. And so our core business model was just wrecked. Within 7 years, our core business model was wrecked. And we had offers to be bought out within a couple of years, and like for some pretty high multiples. And we didn't, we thought, why would we sell? We're growing at a great rate of knots. And so that's the one regret that I have. The thing that the highlight is learning to develop really strong pattern recognition about new major transformational changes in our industry. So after watching e-commerce become completely normalized and standardized globally to where it's the norm and people are happy to buy online and they feel very low risk, to the rise of mobile, to the rise of other patterns that happened in our industry that just completely and radically changed everything about the way we do things in the world. And then seeing that start to play out in B2B and pivoting and getting out of the agency game and going all in on B2B e-commerce consultancy now, and seeing that market evolve so fast over the last 4 years after I made that pivot, and me being vindicated and validated, that's where I saw the market going and where I saw the market opportunity going. And I saw massive blue ocean space there, and I jumped into it early because of that pattern recognition. That's probably a highlight.
Wow. Nice.
Love it. Thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to speak to you again soon, my friend. If you'd like to get mentored by Jason for free, head over to greenwoodconsulting.net, scroll to the bottom of the page, and click Get Mentored by Jason.